You're watching Teng Tools Muscle Garage, the home of New Zealand's toughest muscle cars, hot rods and street machines. Muscle Garage is proudly brought to you by Teng Tools in association with Mount Shop, Maguire's and Niedercar. Coming up, a soggy second time round for the NZ HSV Owners Show at Orewa Beach, and the Generation Game, the Warkworth family keeping hot rodding's future in-house. But first up, thanks to Niedercar, we're in the Waikato checking out Studebaker stalwart Trev Halstead's new but old 51 Champion.
Anything that everyone wants, I go the other direction. I don't want something that everyone else has got. And even in my cars that I build myself, each one of them I try to make quite different, even though they have similarities in the models and in the body shapes. I still want them to be different to the previous one. The Bomber was my second Studi, and I brought in Dunedin about 47 years ago. Cost me $40. Drove it home in 2 gears. Wasn't in the best of conditions, but yeah, that's where it all started. In its original form, it's an unusual car, but the Studi really appealed to me because of its eccentricness, if you like, with the bullet nose centre. Just, yeah, the shape really attracted me.
The Studi sedan has been the recipient of several major overhauls in Trev's near 5-decade tenure of ownership. But this most recent makeover wasn't quite by choice. Some front-end customisation by blunt force.
79 was its first New Zealand Hot Rod Association Nationals that it went to. That was its first build. It had some pretty strange things then that we look back on and think, God, why'd you do that? But, you know, that's what we did then. Each time the car evolved, more and more things got done to it. Obviously it's been chopped, the chassis has been zedded, we've shaved the gutters on it, radiused the doors, put a tilt front on. The tilt front is the sort of ongoing thing that's always been on it. It's always had a tilt front, probably not a thing for nowadays, but it's just what was on the car and I just wanted to keep it, you know.
And for Trev, the Studebaker canvas makes for one that's less restrictive when it comes to heavy customisation.
There's no expectations of what should or shouldn't be done with them. Stuff like a 56 Chev or something like that, there's a pretty high standard set. I don't have to end up in the same sort of compartment as everyone else.
By definition, the Bomber is what you term a radical custom. But being the eagle-eyed viewers that you are, you've already picked there's a couple more doors in play than what's typical for a traditional custom vehicle.
Not a lot of people chop a 4-door sedan, particularly that sort of body shape, but keeping in mind that when I got it, you were very, very lucky to find a 51 Studi or a 50 Studi 2-door or a coupe. In those days, I wouldn't have done what I do to them now, you know. Now, of course, with all the American imports, there's a lot more in the country than there was back in the 70s.
More, yes, but they're still not exactly common. And the lack of abundant factory-fresh examples for comparison does mean that much of Trev's custom touches slip under the radar.
It's just like anything else. When I'm building it, I want to make it nice to appeal to me. The fact that people don't notice it is not really a problem in that they have nothing to compare it to anyway. You know, like all the little badges, the scripts and badges are all made out of stainless steel. The mouldings on the inside of the doors, the surround around the radio, just detail that makes the car look nice. And people don't actually notice it, but they think that looks really nice and smooth and tidy, but they can't find an answer why it looks like that. It just is, you know.
Some factory cues, however, are off limits.
If you're going to build a Bomber, a bullet nose Studi, you need to keep it a bullet nose Studi. If you change that, you lose the whole concept of the car, which my green delivery is a similar sort of a vehicle. Once again, it rotates round the Bomber, even though the Bomber nose itself mightn't be exactly stock. That's the main feature of the front of the car.
Trev's a fan of Chev's big block, and a fair few of them have made their way into his custom builds over the years, present company included. The 427 now weighs in at a warmed-over 439 cubic inches, backed by a turbo 400 feeding a Mopar diff. Steering and suspension remains all Studebaker, although the components have been raided from other branches of the family tree.
Well, it drives like a 50s car. She's not a racing vehicle by any means, but she goes quite well. Not a big dollar motor by any means. In fact, it was a very cheap motor. It was made from all the leftovers from other big blocks over a period of time.
And perhaps the most impressive part of this truly unique car? It's owner-built. It's a term thrown around perhaps a little lightly these days, but this highly customised Studebaker Champion is about as deserving of the title as they come.
I like to be able to do it myself. Even if it's a first-time thing that I've not done before, I'd rather spend a day or two doing it myself than paying someone to do it who might be able to do it in a couple of hours. It started out with right at the very beginning where I tried painting and panel beating and things like that, and they weren't all that good. But they got better as we went through the years, and I've been at it since I was 17, so I'm a wee bit older than that now, so I've learned a little bit along the way.
In its latest incarnation, the Bomber will soon chalk up 50 years in Trev's care. You may have built his cars for him, but when it comes to New Zealand's custom car landscape, Trev's the guy who's put Studebaker on the map.
It's definitely a car that I hope that takes people's attention, you know, like not your normal run-of-the-mill vehicle. Oh, I'd be keen to encourage anyone to buy a Studi, and building them is, once again, they can have the choice of what they want to do with it. Like any vehicle, you know, they can go radical, or they can just have a pretty stock street machine with an engine change, or even a resto. But yeah, buy a Studi.
Right, thanks to our mates at Mount Shop, it's shed raid time. This week, we meet the Warkworth family keeping New Zealand's hot rod future in-house.
My dad, he was in the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers, saying when he was in the war how they'd have to go in after a fight in the desert and make one vehicle out of 3 or 4 to save the boys, you know. I was born in London, and one of my dad's cars was a 2-door English Ford V8, suicide doors on the front, on the English ones. And when I was 15, I managed to buy a 4-door sedan. Yeah, that was the first one, and it's just gone on from there, because I like the older cars a lot better than flash Harry new stuff. They don't do nothing for me.
An outlook that Steve in turn has dutifully passed on to the next generation of the Sharp family.
Yeah, I think I was, from the day I could talk, I was hassling my dad to buy this car and that car, you know. Probably what hooked me would have been the late 60s muscle car era. Just that shape of those muscle cars was just cool, you know, so, you know, that's probably what did it. I think as time went on, the hot rod bug hit. That probably took hold just as much as the muscle car thing, so it's good to have a bit of variety, I suppose, eh? It can be good and bad, because once you get in there, you can't get out, eh? There's a good thing there.
It's of little surprise that this collection has grown to the impressive sight that it is. Not that they all fit in one place, mind you. At first glance, the collection seems an eclectic one. Those muscle car and hot rod influences are represented, but look a bit closer, and there's a pretty clear trend that's taking hold.
Mainly cars up to 1948, Fords, especially 32s. I've got 7 of those now. All different models. I really enjoy the shape of them. Even working on them is great fun. Making a better car out of what someone else might call a heap of junk.
History is the hook for Steve. A car with a story, best today's readily available fiberglass or steel reproductions. Likewise, it's tomorrow's hot rod history that he and his family are forging out today. It's of little surprise that when you're this deep in the hobby, it has become a profession as well as a lifestyle. Warkworth's Sharp Auto Refinishes isn't technically a hot rod shop, but with 3 generations of the family on the payroll and a reputation for turning out top quality cars, it sure is starting to look like one.
Over the years, we've been doing it for a long time, and things have changed. You know, we're doing more of what we want to do now. Doing a lot of hot rod stuff, and you know, and getting this show quality workmanship out the door. So pretty happy with that.
With hobby and professional boxes ticked, the Sharp boys are well qualified when it comes to what makes a good car.
You're better off to pay a bit more money than what you even wanted to pay to get the right car rather than buy a lemon because the price is right. Even if you've got to borrow a bit of money, you're better off to buy the best you can.
Definitely stance, got to get the wheel and tyre right. Proportions are pretty important. The factory proportions of these old muscle cars and hot rods, they seem to get it pretty right. So we're not a big fan of chopping them up. If they're done right, they're cool, but you've got to be careful, I reckon.
With families like the Sharps doing an admirable job of passing not only the passion, but also old school know-how onto its younger generations, the future of New Zealand hot rodding looks in good hands. And with a collection as impressive as this one, so it would seem, is our history.
Amazing results, even at full sight.
You're back with Teng Tools Muscle Garage, proudly brought to you by Teng Tools, in association with Mount Shop, Maguire's and Niedercar. Right, thanks to the good folk at Maguire's, we're off to a rather soggy Orewa Beach for the second annual HSV show, hosted by the New Zealand HSV Owners Club.
2017, I came up with this idiotic idea to have a HSV only car show, and the HSV club came on board. So we ran it last year, Friday night before the show. We had 17 entries. We're going, bugger. That day we had 50 cars turn up. Today we've got 41 cars on a fairly inclement day. It's just for anybody who's a lover of HSVs.
HSVs and a penchant for wet weather wear would be a bonus today, so let's take this indoors for a minute and talk HSV history. 2017 marked the end of an era for HSV as we knew it. October rolled round and with it Australian manufacturer Holden shut up shop on its local production for good. HSV's go-to starting point, the Aussie Commodore, was no more. And yes, while the HSV brand lives on and re-engineering other GM platforms for local markets, it's a world away from the HSV that's amassed such a loyal fan base over the last 3 decades. So that's where the Aussie HSV ended. But where did it start? Well, while the Holden dealer team or HDT partnership with legendary wheelman Peter Brock would see a number of high-performance models available through supporting dealers earlier, it wasn't until Holden joined forces with Tom Walkinshaw in the late 80s that the Holden Special Vehicles platform was born. Till Holden Australia's local production ground to a halt in 2017, HSV had rolled out muscled-up cousins of the Commodore range, and with each release, a bump in tech and performance. Right up to about here, in fact. We don't know what HSV's future holds exactly, but what we do know is that its past is now that much more special. Something you won't need to convince a group called the New Zealand HSV Owners Club of.
Started about 1994, a group of HSV enthusiasts had a meeting at Moy's back in those days. So yeah, about 25 years we've been going. Over the years, the club has its membership go up and down. I think in its heyday, we were running our own track days at Pukekohe. We had nationals at Taupo every year. We're down to a nice little car club. Some have been with the club for 25 years, and that experience is invaluable in setting up events like this.
For my 18th birthday, my parents gave me my first car, which was a 1976 HJ Kingswood. From then on, fell in love with Holdens. Had just about every model of Commodore. Last year we were looking around and took the test drive of this 2015 R8. And when we were test driving it, that's when I found out that it was build number 1 of 8 in New Zealand. And from then I was just sold straight away. I just already made up my decision before I even got back to the yard. I wouldn't sell this, not for the amount of money in the world. No, this is it, and this is staying in the garage. Because there's no more V8s, of actual Holdens, it's my forever car now.
They're an icon, sure, but it might be a bit too soon to call any HSV a classic just yet. But when they do, Ross's VN will be right at the pointy end of the queue.
I found it about 8 months ago in St Heliers, a little bit of a diamond in the rough. Spent a couple of hundred hours on the paintwork on it. It's all original. Stripped everything out of it and put it all back in, and it's as you see it today. Very rare, so I like it, like driving it. It's 500 horsepower, 800 newton metres of torque, and 6-speed manual. It's got aluminium heads and it's got a stroker kit, the cam kit, but all the original parts are in home in their garage. So that's how it sort of makes it a little bit more enjoyable to drive.
And drive it he does, regardless of early autumn's weather.
No, it's been driven in the rain before, it'll be driven in the rain again.
I went down to Schofield's after receiving some inheritance money to buy myself a double S. And I was looking at this beautiful red double S down there, and my daughter was in the showroom and she said, "Mum," and pointed into a car that was in there. So I went in and there was this Murph sitting there, and I just came out in goosebumps and looked at it and thought, oh, it's manual. I'm too lazy to drive a manual. The sales girl came up and she said, "We have them in Tiptronic," and that was it. That was me, I was gone. I now own a 2008 VE Series Murph. She's my baby.
And like the car's namesake, owner Colleen is not averse to burying the right foot, when appropriate.
I drive like a nana. I do, until you put me on the track or on a drag strip. And then I've got this little tiger inside me that comes out and goes, "Oh, we're going fast now." Love it, absolutely love it. Even after, as I said, nearly 11 years, I still just, all the hairs stand up and I just absolutely love driving her.
With the last of HSV's Australian vehicles closing in on the 500 kilowatt mark, you could be forgiven for thinking all-out power was the company's hard and fast MO. So it might come as a surprise to see a Colorado with an HSV plate parked here. However, it wouldn't be the first time HSV has deviated from its usual course and been down a couple of cylinders.
HSV decided that they wanted to have some cheaper cars made, so they commissioned Holden to make them, and they produced 430 sedans, 20 station wagons and 75 utes. New Zealand-wise, it's one of 130, nothing fancy as such. It was basically an Australian executive inside. Still has its HSV build plate. It stayed in the Holden factory and it got plated there, and there were some other 6-cylinder models that were made in Holden factory too, and then they never actually made it to the HSV factory at all, but they're still an HSV as such, yeah.
And if you thought that didn't look like an HSV, then the sight of a Torana will really confuse you. Simple explanation, however. The club extended an invite to Torana owners this year, and ironically, being bright yellow and not an HSV seems the best way to stand out at an HSV show. Richard's A9X inspired hatch taking out people's choice.
I bought this car when I was 18, flew down to Masterton because there was only 2 for sale in the country, so I wanted a hatch. There was only a red one that I could get my hands on. I hate red cars, so as it happens, it went into the shed for 2 years and come out looking like that. So I fully A90 inspected. It runs a 9-inch rear end with true track NASCAR head, shopping 1-ton ute axles, VKSS discs. I've recently put a Tramic TKO 600 5-speed in there, and that was the only way I could make it bomb-proof, because the M21s just don't like doing burnouts.
Having owned it from his teens, it was in a moment of weakness that Richard would part ways with the Torana, a mistake that took quite some time to rectify.
18 years later, my mate found it for me, so there was only one option, is to get it back. I've never looked back since, and it'll never be on the market again.
If the General's blood flows in your veins too, then keep an eye out for next year's 3rd annual HSV Car Show at Orewa. Just book some better weather. Want to win big? Prizes don't get much bigger than this one. A massive Teng Tools 417-piece toolkit, 7-drawer cabinet and 6-drawer top box, a complete Maguire's car care pack and a $500 Mount Shop voucher. What do you need to do to be in to win? Simply head to themotorhood.com and hit the Teng Tools Muscle Garage link. Easy. Teng Tools Muscle Garage was proudly brought to you by Teng Tools. Get organised. Mount Shop, undercar specialists. Maguire's, people who love cars love Maguire's. And Need a Car, the easy way to research and buy cars online.